Hello, and welcome to South Asia Chat, a podcast series brought to you by the Institute of South Asian Studies at the National University of Singapore. My name is Imran Ahmed. I'm a research fellow here at ISAS. Today, we'll explore the pressing issue of Islamist militancy and counterterrorism in Pakistan. Joining us is Abdul Basit, a senior associate fellow at the Rajaratnam School of International Studies, Nanyang Technological University. Basit specializes in the study of political violence, religious extremism, counterterrorism, and security in South Asia. In this episode, we'll discuss the factors driving the rise of Islamist militancy, the impact of the Taliban's return to Afghanistan, the challenges of cross-border terrorism, and the specifics of Pakistan's recent operation Azm-i-Istekham. A warm welcome to you, Basit. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me, Imran. Good to be on your podcast.
Wonderful. So I'll go straight into the questions. The first question I had, so we've read a lot about recent attacks on police and military personnel. What are the primary factors driving the rise of Islamist militancy and extremism in Pakistan? And how do you think these factors have evolved over the years?
So there are 3 to 4 main factors of why militancy has risen in Pakistan. The first is Pakistan's flawed Afghan policy, which was pro-Taliban. Of course, the second is Taliban's return to power in Afghanistan, which has been, a force multiplier for groups like Tehreek-e-Taliban Pakistan. Taliban not only have provided shelter to TTP in Afghanistan, but they are also, providing funding to the group. Of course, publicly Taliban deny that, but there is enough information in the open space which strongly suggests that TTP operates from Afghanistan under the Taliban's patronage. And the third factor is the American withdrawal. As long as the US was here, while there were, several challenges associated with the American presence in the region, but due to that presence, terrorism was under control as far as Pakistan is concerned. So the withdrawal of the US, Pakistan's flawed pro-Taliban Afghan policy, and the Taliban's return to Pakistan have cumulatively contributed to the rise of militancy. There are some, sub-factors. For instance, TTP, managed to stitch together, a coalition and overcome various factional differences which were undermining the network, prior to the Taliban's takeover. So you put these 3 or 4 factors together, and they account for, the rise of militancy. Now, how they have evolved since the Taliban's return is that TTP is literally copying Taliban's insurgency model. So, like Taliban, they have, declared shadow provinces and ministers and governors. In Pakistan, they have divided the country into 2 military zones, south and the north, and they are using the same rhetoric which the Taliban were using. And they have adjusted their targeting strategy from indiscriminate to discriminate violence. So they hit hard targets, spare soft targets, and the idea is to win the hearts and minds. And they are trying to evolve from a terrorist group to an insurgent group. In all this process, they have been able to expand their outreach in Pakistan, expand their network, and their operational strategy has strengthened in the last 3 years.
If I could just ask a quick, just a follow-up question. You mentioned outreach. How does that outreach happen?
So they are using the sanctuaries in Afghanistan as a force multiplier. So first they, re-emerged in the ex-Fata region or the newly merged districts closer to Afghanistan-Pakistan border areas. From there, they expanded into KP. From KP, they have, further expanded their network into Balochistan. And now we are seeing their presence in Karachi as well. And they have carried out attacks in parts of Punjab as well. So what they are doing is they are trying to evolve from a guerrilla group to an urban insurgent groups, because attacks in the urban areas leave a greater impact. Uh, an attack in the peripheral area is reported, but it doesn't get the kind of media attention which an attack in an urban center gets. So a smaller attack gets more media attention, brings publicity to terrorist groups, which is oxygen for these groups, because they don't do violence for the sake of violence, but they do violence to draw attention to their ideological outlook, grievances, goals, and demands, and they try to make their objectives prominent. So, what the Taliban have done, they announced different so-called wilayas or provinces in different parts of Pakistan, and they then, maneuvered their, leadership structure, organizational structure in a way that they wanted more attacks on mainland Pakistan. So this is how they have used their network. This is how they have used their sanctuaries in different parts of the country to expand from their traditional stronghold areas of the ex-Fatah region to other areas of Pakistan. So as I said, they have a network in Balochistan, they have shown presence in Karachi, and they are showing their presence in Punjab as well.
Do they use things like social media or sort
Yes.
of? Okay.
Yes, they again, something they have learned from the Afghan Taliban. So TTP's social media or propaganda arm, Al Umar media, has come of age. It has matured. TTP is very tech savvy. They not only uh, publish a regular magazine, Mujalla Tehreek-e-Taliban Pakistan, which is a monthly Urdu language periodical. Separately, they publish a magazine for women as well. So they are not only trying to, radicalize men, but they are focusing on women as well. At the same time, they have several podcasts. They run a radio channel as well. They put out regular statement, not only claiming different attacks, but they also comment on important issues and developments in Pakistan as well. So if you look at the quality of their propaganda material, visual and non-visual, not only the content, but production quality has also improved. This is because now they have better equipment, they have more trained personnel who are sitting in Afghanistan and who have enough time, and they're using that security umbrella that the Taliban have provided them to improve the quality both in terms of production as well as content. And their materials now come out with great regularity. So they have used social media platforms which provide them an avenue to voice their point of view and their ideological outlook, to articulate their narrative or their side of the story. And that ability has undermined Pakistani state's narratives against the Taliban again and against TTP. And they expose the flaws in Pakistani thinking. And if Pakistani state is trying to, create a certain narrative which has factual flaws and holes in them, TTP would expose those holes. And this is why Pakistani state is struggling against this group, not only on the physical battlefield, but on the front of media or information warfare as well.
Thank you so much for that. I want to move to my second question. I think it's in two parts, and I think you've touched on it, the first part a little bit already. What impact has the Taliban's return to power in Afghanistan had on militancy in Pakistan? And what do you think are the key challenges Pakistan faces in addressing cross-border terrorism, especially with regards to the fact that they have strained relations with Kabul?
So, Taliban's return to power had exacerbated the security situation in Pakistan. So, terrorism has increased by 73% in Pakistan since the Taliban's return to power. And TTP is the direct and major beneficiary of the Taliban's return to power in Afghanistan. It had an energizing and rejuvenating impact on TTP. Now, Pakistan was expecting cooperation from the Taliban against TTP for helping them to return to power, but the exact opposite has happened. And there are three bad policies or poorly thought policies converging at a point. It is Pakistan's poor counterterrorism strategy, which has fluctuated between peace talks and military operations. Pakistan's, and I've discussed it at length, Pakistan's flawed Afghan policy, pro-Taliban Afghan policy, based on the premise of expecting, cooperation from the Taliban. Even if there were those expectations, I mean, unlike the US, which signed the Doha Agreement with the Taliban, Pakistan did not sign any pact or a deal with the Taliban based on which they just hoped that the Taliban would cooperate. But they had no reasons or basis, any legal grounds or any understanding which bound the Taliban to cooperate with them. And lastly, the poor, border policy. All these bad policies, are converging at a point, contributing to the rise of militancy. Now, as far as challenges are concerned, Pakistan's biggest challenge is since the US withdrawal, counter-terrorism at the international level is not a priority anymore. So there is no funding now available. So Pakistan, given its bad economic situation, has no financial bandwidth to afford a large-scale military offensive, number one. Number two, politically, the society is very polarized. So the public support that the state needs to effectively crack down against groups like TTP is just not there. There is the state society gap is so big that people in Khyber Pakhtunkhwa, which is the most affected area by the rise of militancy in Pakistan, political parties, civil society organizations, and public at large have serious trust issues with the military's claim of starting a new military offensive. They believe that it will displace people within the province and create more problems for them. The third is diplomatic challenge, because if Pakistan uses force against TTP in Afghanistan, Taliban would view that as violation of Afghanistan's sovereignty and as an act of aggression and a declaration of war, and they will retaliate. We have seen that 20 years of military approach by the US in Afghanistan did not achieve any substantive results. So Pakistan's military action, airstrikes or use of drones against TTP sanctuaries in Afghanistan will worsen the problem rather than addressing it. So, and diplomatically, Pakistan has tried a lot without much success to convince the Taliban to reconsider their approach towards TTP. They have asked them to relocate TTP from border areas. They have asked them to disarm or expel them to Pakistan, any territory, and then Pakistan will. And Taliban have, they tried relocated them, but it was just, for public consumption beyond some token gestures or movements. They didn't do much. So I think these are all the challenges for Pakistan, that even if they start a military operation, they don't have the money to afford it. They don't have the public support. And in a way, Pakistan is isolated. Even regional countries, they are sympathetic to Pakistan, but beyond an extent, they will not pressurize the Taliban to expel TTP.
So my third question, how does Operation Azm-i-Istekham differ from previous counterterrorism initiatives that you mentioned, and particularly in terms of strategy and objectives? And what do you think is its efficacy?
So, when the government announced Azm-i-Istekham strategy, initially they used the term operation. But as soon as this term operation was coined, there was a severe backlash, as I discussed in answering your previous question, strong backlash from KP that we cannot afford another military operation. And as soon as there were protests and objections to a new operation, the government, backtracked and said this is not an operation, but it's a strategy. It's a new counterterrorism framework. So Pakistan, formulated a national action plan, a 20-point, strategy to counter extremism, terrorism in the aftermath of the army public school attack, which took place in December 2014. That action plan had 20 points. It was revised in 2021. It was reduced to 14 points. Of the 14 points, 18 have been implemented and 6 points were neglected. So Azm-i-Istekham tries to, strike a balance between kinetic or military efforts and non-kinetic or non-military efforts, or hard efforts and soft efforts to counter extremism and terrorism. So Azm-i-Istekham is different from previous strategies or operation in a sense that it, according to the government, it doesn't involve a large-scale military operation. Rather, it focuses on those 6 neglected points of the National Action Plan. So it has 3 major components. One component is, of course, kinetic, under which the military will try to expedite the ongoing intelligence-based operations by improving, interinstitutional coordination of different law enforcement agencies with the military, number one. Number two, it has a diplomatic component where they will try to work with like-minded countries such as China and Russia to, bring pressure on the Taliban to rethink their approach towards TTP. And again, to repeat, think about relocating them, disarming them, or expelling them to Pakistan. And the third component of this new strategy is focusing on the informal economy in the border regions, Afghanistan-Pakistan border regions, because the state believes that this informal economy indirectly benefits these terrorist groups. And they run their terrorist operations by, benefiting from this informal economy. So as long as this economy is not formalized and cross-border militant movement, cross-border movement of people is not regulated through a visa regime, no amount of military action and improving in institutional coordination will help in eradicating terrorism. So it has a military component, it has a diplomatic component, and then it has a third component with focus on cross-border movement of people and focusing on regularizing the informal economy.
Now, with did the government mention sort of how it would evaluate sort of key indicators of success for this?
So government just announced a new strategy, but they haven't provided any details. So government's announcement has added to existing confusions among the people. They do not know if this is not a new military offensive and it is the continuation of the ongoing intelligence-based operation. Intelligence-based operations have been going on in Pakistan for the last 3 years, but the security situation has rapidly deteriorated. So what is so new about these intelligence-based operations, which will now start delivering results or better results? Uh, if this is not a new military offensive, uh, in the first place, why there was a need to coin a new term? First, they called it an operation. Later, they called it a strategy. They announced the strategy first, and then they called an all parties conference to create a consensus. If they had to create a consensus, they simply, what was required was to take the strategy or the new, framework of counterterrorism in the parliament and debate it and create a consensus and then announce. They announced it first and then announced an all parties conference afterwards. So all these parties asked that now that you have made up your mind and you have devised a strategy, what's the point of debating it? So all these different contradictions in the government's positions and backtracking, calling it an operation, then calling it a strategy, has added to that public confusion and has further undermined the state's moral authority in convincing people that they have a sound plan of overcoming the challenge of militancy. So there was no strategy, no operational details given of how they are going to go about it and how it will differ from the intelligence-based operations which were going on before, and the operations in the future will deliver better results. No details have been given.
So it sounds like there's a lot of ambiguities, and so consequently, it's difficult to have any metrics.
Yes.
So my last question is, how does the presence of Islamist militancy in Pakistan affect the country's relations with its neighbors?
The attacks in Pakistan, deteriorating security situation, have created this environment of insecurity. China is the largest foreign investor right now in Pakistan. Chinese projects, their workers and their interests have been, targeted, and it has come to a point where, out of frustration, China has warned Pakistan that if there is another attack on Chinese interests, they will withdraw their investment from Pakistan. And this is one of the push factors why Pakistan announced a new counterterrorism strategy, because China demanded it. So it has impacted Pakistan ties with China. These militants are using, Pakistani territory to go and launch attacks in Iran. Iran fired missiles into Pakistani territory earlier this year, and Pakistan responded in a tit-for-tat manner. And this was the first time that the two countries were exchanging missiles, and there was tension on Afghanistan, Pakistan-Iran border. Of course, Pakistan has poor relationship with the Taliban due to the same issue. Pakistan's ties with India, it's everybody knows it. One of the factors for that is terrorism. In India levels allegations as well, but there are groups which have used Pakistani territory to go and carry out attacks on India as well. So overall, if you look at Pakistan's neighborhood, terrorism, whether it is in Pakistan or emanating from Pakistan, has contributed to poor relationship with its neighbors.
How do you think it's sort of shaped with these domestic security concerns? How does it shape Pakistan's foreign policy towards its neighbors, knowing full well that they are cautious with the situation?
Pakistan lives in a very hot and a hostile neighborhood.
Yes.
So if there is terrorism emanating from Afghanistan and groups operating out of Pakistan, Iran has, backed certain militia groups as well, proxy groups in the Middle East. Iran has recruited from Pakistan and Afghanistan the Shia volunteers to fight against ISIS. and to support the Assad regime in Iran. So Iran has been involved in, recruiting, training, funding, and mobilizing Shia militias in Afghanistan, Pakistan. Taliban are, of course, patronizing TTP. India, because Pakistan supported these Kashmir-focused militant groups like Lashkar-e-Taiba, Jaish-e-Mohammed, India has been supporting the Baloch insurgent groups in Balochistan to foment violence in Pakistan. One of the Indian, spies, he was caught in Pakistani Balochistan, who was living in Iran and providing support to, Pakistani Baloch separatist groups. So all these countries, in one way or the other, are involved in supporting some groups and facing threat from the other. So it's a hot and a very hostile neighborhood where everyone, has its hands dirty in one way or the other. Pakistan perhaps has its hand dirtier than others, but everyone in one way or the other at the current stage is involved in facing attacks from one group and then supporting some other groups in revenge or in retaliation.
So there'd be considerable distrust between all parties to some.
Goes without saying, yes.
I think that's all we have time for. Thank you so much, Basit.
Thank you.
You've given us so much to think about and really laid out the nuanced picture of the situation. You are listening to South Asia Chat. You can learn more about our work by visiting us at isas.nus.edu.sg. You can also get updates on our research and publications through social media. You can find us on Twitter, LinkedIn, Facebook, and Instagram.